This week in Texas, we talk about the Harris County budget and the potential $200 million shortfall. We also continue our conversation with Senator Ted Cruz, who discusses the midterms and the war with Iran. Also, Steve Radack, the Republican candidate for Harris County Precinct 4 Commissioner, talks about the race. And our political insiders offer their thoughts on the border and Big Bend National Park. This week in Texas. And hello again, everyone. I'm Tom Abrams. This week in Texas, we begin with the Harris County budget up for a vote just a month from now. One Harris County commissioner says homeowners could soon see one of the largest property tax rate increases in the county's history. This week, we also learned how they could hike taxes. It's money the budget director says the county needs to help close a nearly $200 million deficit. ABC 13's Nick Notario has the story.
In a matter of weeks, Harris County homeowners could soon learn what next year's tax bill will look like.
So that will be the second largest increase in the history of Harris County.
On Monday, commissioners discussed a budget proposal. In it includes a tax rate increase that would go from 62 to 68 cents. Here's what the budget office says that would mean for your property taxes. The average homestead appraisal, they say, is around $400,000. If approved, they say the taxes on that home would climb by $226. As for who's to blame for you possibly paying more for property taxes, Commissioner Leslie Briones says it's on state and federal leaders.
They keep passing laws that are unfunded mandates. The federal government continues to slash services that our Harris County families rely on. And meanwhile, we are trying to stretch your local taxpayer dollars.
Judge Lena Hidalgo, though, says they have no one to blame but themselves after commissioners increased deputy and constable pay last year.
No, it's not about state mandates, and no, it's not about, inflation. Nothing amounts to the $300 million, probably $400 million with other increases that have been committed.
Hidalgo says in addition to taxes, commissioners will also consider cutting programs, including one that works with children of domestic violence. They'll also look at increasing fees, including those tied to evictions. The budget office says it wants to spend more than $320 million than last year. Officials say health care costs, higher police pay, unfreezing some positions, and inflation are adding to the deficit that could soon increase your taxes.
I wouldn't call that an East Texas poor man's budget. That is a pretty good increase in spending in 1 year.
Let's talk more about the Harris County budget now. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Our panel of political insiders, Angel Carroll, J.C. Jatan, join me now to offer their insight on this subject. J.C., we'll start with you. It seems like there are a lot of different perspectives as to how much money the county does or doesn't have.
Yeah, and that's always frustrating. They have their tax base. They should be able to calculate the valuations and then come up with a tax rate. The biggest concern that I seem to have with it all is, we knew during the COVID years when all the money from the federal was coming down, it allowed counties and cities to grow government at a rate that was faster than what they could handle if that federal funding went away. It went away for everybody, and now 254 counties and over 1,200 cities are having to deal with a lot less funding.
Yeah, Harris County's not alone in this, but certainly being the largest county, it's front and center.
It's front and center. It's the same conversation, different year, and a conversation of where are we going to try and cut things and make savings. And, people are feeling it harder now than ever. And maybe not so much now more than ever, but more recently. And I think it's also concerning when folks are looking at who's gotten pay raises and who is going to be affected by these tax cuts.
Yeah, well, so that, these services may go down, the taxes may go up, and then as we saw, within the last few weeks, that they gave all 8 constables another raise to $305,000 a year. Most people would not argue for giving pay increases to the frontline first responders, be they firefighters, paramedics, law enforcement. This is a little different, though.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we love our law enforcement. We want to make sure they get paid, but that means that you have to cut from somewhere else. And I think there was a lot of comfort that, they had a lot of wiggle room in last year's budget where they had the 8% that they could get threshold that they could go because of the disaster declaration. You can't keep on growing at that rate. Prior to 2023, I think the county was growing at a reasonable rate on its tax rate, and to increase it that much right now, especially with all the things going on with inflation inflation and everything else, a lot of people are pulling back, and ideally the county is doing the same.
Well, I think there's 2 points to that too, right? If you invest in services, right, and prevention as well, then there's a load off of the backs of our law enforcement. On top of that, our constables are now getting paid more than the Vice President of the United States of America. Like, that's crazy to me. I mean, we appreciate the work that they do, but that's a bit excessive if you ask me.
You don't get into government or law enforcement to get wealthy. Well, I mean, I guess maybe sometimes you do, but that's not the idea, right?
Well, the whole thing, so I think it is reasonable pay. You know, I'm all for the free market, and, you know, if Harris County wants to make sure they get the best and the brightest on the front lines, I think that is great to increase their pay to that, but you still have to do within the responsibility what you have to spend, and the spending, you know, the amount of tax dollars they have has dropped unless they substantially increase it on the people, and the people will have to decide, is that where they want to spend the money? I think it was the Rice Baker School Institute, they did a study. I mean, their recommendation on it was that, listen, we grew the workforce, the FTEs, full-time employees, and the salaries substantially over the last few years based on the back of federal dollars that aren't there anymore. And I think you got to pull back on that now.
And now they've got to figure out how to budget when you don't have any money to budget.
And how do they do that? I mean,
it's either raise taxes or reduce spending.
And which do you think is going to happen when it comes to September? Because you have some saying, oh, we're fine, we don't need to increase taxes, it is an election year after all, and then you have some saying, I don't see how we maintain the services we have without a penny increase or more.
Well, I think they have the elected officials have a responsibility to explain why there's a tax increase if there's going to be one, and it makes the most sense. Our expectation of our elected officials should be you're going line by line through that budget, and you're making sure that we're only spending money where we need to be spending it. And if you cut where you can, and if you have to go up, you better be able to explain it to the voters.
Yes, and then who again are we raising the taxes for? I think that it shouldn't go immediately to the taxpayers if we can avoid it.
You mean the taxpayers shouldn't foot the bill?
I think
initially?
Absolutely.
All right. I mean, it is tough times for everybody. It makes it all the harder. Nobody ever wants to see taxes go up, right? But that makes it even harder.
That's right.
All right, Angel JC, we'll see you later in the program. Thanks for that discussion. When we come back, more of our interview with Senator Ted Cruz, his thoughts about the midterms, specifically the Senate race between Ken Paxton and James Tallarico, and the war with Iran, what he says he told President Donald Trump about an exit strategy. Welcome back to This Week in Texas. On our previous episode, Senator Ted Cruz spoke about his efforts to help college sports through legislation on Capitol Hill. This week, we continue that conversation where we discuss the midterms and the war with Iran.
The polling for Republicans is bumpy right now, and that's often the case in a midterm where the party out of power is energized and they're angry. In this case, the left really, really hates Donald Trump, and that motivates a lot of energy and turnout on their side. Look, I am hopeful. I'm spending a lot of time supporting my colleagues. In the last decade, there's no Republican in the country who's campaigned for more Senate candidates, House candidates, gubernatorial candidates than I have. Here in Texas, we have a very competitive race between Ken Paxton and James Tallarico. I believe Paxton's going to win that race. Tallarico, his views are extreme, and they're out of step with the voters of Texas. And right now, most Texans don't know that. If you are running for the wokest liberal in California, James Tallarico is a superstar. But I don't think those are the common sense values of most Texans.
Are the values that Ken Paxton has publicly espoused, are those the values of Texans?
Look, I think Ken is running based on a common sense conservative agenda. Secure the border, support law enforcement, low taxes, low regulation.
Let's talk about one of the issues, certainly, that a lot on the right have been not happy about going into the midterms, and that's the war with Iran. You yourself have been critical of the way that war has been prosecuted. How do we get out of that war?
So listen, I think the president's decision to take out Iran's nuclear capacity is the most important national security decision the president has made this second term. The Islamic regime in Iran has been waging war with the United States for 47 years. And I want to be clear. President Trump has been unequivocal. We're not going to see boots on the ground. This is not Iraq. This is not going to be hundreds of thousands of troops in the Middle East on the ground.
I remember in 2016 when you were running for president, part of your stump speech included the deal that the Obama administration struck with Iran, and you were very critical of it, particularly because of the monetary benefit that Iran received.
Yes.
Are you concerned that the monetary benefit that they receive at the end of this war, however it ends, makes them better off than they were before the war started?
I don't believe that's going to happen. I very much hope it doesn't happen. I can tell you about a month ago when the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding were released, I was the first and for a long time the only Republican senator who was critical and deeply critical of it.
Thanks to Senator Ted Cruz. When we come back, a conversation with a Republican nominee for Harris County Precinct 4, Steve Radack. Welcome back. Well, we heard from Senator Ted Cruz about the midterms and his thoughts specifically about the race for the U.S. Senate. Now let's turn to a local race. Last week, you heard from Precinct 4 Commissioner Leslie Briones. Well, this week, we're joined by her opponent, Steve Radack. He is the Republican nominee and a former county commissioner who served, is it 32 years?
32 years.
Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So why do you want back, after some time off and spending so much time at the county? What's your reasoning?
It's so frustrating to see how Commissioner's Court is today compared to what it was. I mean, it was amazing from the standpoint that Democrats and Republicans pretty much got along, and it worked very, very well. And I think it served the public very well. But now you see it's the infighting. You see the taxes skyrocketing, and I think it's just reached a point that something needs to change. And I think we need to go back to meetings that don't take hours upon hours, and where we can go in there, get the people in, meaning our engineers and whoever need to be in Commissioner's Court, get them to participate in the court, and then let them go back to work. There's no reason to have these meetings for all these hours.
So you've watched and you've seen it change in a way that you thought, I need to go back and get things back to the way they were, or put a new stamp on things? Well,
I'd love to go back to a lot of things, ways it was. But right now, what our problem is that it's like a ball game, and they're slugging and doing whatever it takes to try to make something happen. But what needs to happen is we need to take care of the public, and we need to watch their taxes and give them the law enforcement and many other things they need.
Now, you were never one who was afraid to express their opinion, right? You didn't pull any punches. Do you think that works on the current state of the commission?
Well, Commissioner's Court is horrible. It's horrible. I mean, I think most people don't even watch it. People think all kind of people are watching. They're not watching. It's just a game, giving proclamation after proclamation and having different arguments and somehow finding a way to make the taxes go higher and higher.
So what would be your priority? I mean, I know in general, law enforcement, keeping taxes low, cutting costs, but what would be your first order of business?
I think one major thing is we have to stop spending so much money. They're spending way too much money. And as a matter of fact, from all indications, you're getting ready to see another tax increase this year, come September 18th. I think it's going up. And it's reaching a point, I believe, that one penny is going to be equal to $66.6 million. And that's based upon the appraisals and what the court votes for. But it's interesting to think you're talking about a court that's likely to set the tax rate at 67.2%, which is extremely high, and that will bring in $5.1 billion. That's over $900 million more than in 2023.
So what would you do? What would be your first priority then if you're elected and you take office in January? What would you try to accomplish?
Stop seeing the court basically waste money. They have so many different things that they're doing that is not really the job of a county commissioner's court.
Your thoughts about the pay raises for the constables? I know that got a lot of attention. We talked about it on our program last week. Each of them getting another raise, this time to $305,000 should this budget go through. Your thoughts about that?
Well, that's something the Commissioner's Court, decided to do. I don't know if that's because if it's election year or whatever, but I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, that's dramatic increase. And some people argue it's all worth it or whatever, but I mean, you're dealing with other people in the county, you know, the ME making almost 600, I mean, yeah, almost 6 million, I mean, excuse me, it's almost 600,000 a year. Think about this. The head of the Harris County Hospital District makes over $2 million a year. There's something wrong with those numbers. We have to bring it down to a reasonable salary.
So you would advocate for lowering some of the higher salaries across the county to help bridge that budget gap?
I think they would all have to be looked at carefully, but I assure you there are some people not getting paid enough and some people are getting paid too much.
So aside from constraining spending, any other priorities, particularly for Precinct 4, which you would be representing should you win?
Well, you've got to spend your money in a way that's going to benefit the majority of the people. And one major problem we have is transportation. Okay, transportation. Some people believe build a whole lot of sidewalks, spend millions and millions on sidewalks. Well, when's the last time you saw a congested sidewalk compared to traffic? And there's no comparison. So we have to open our eyes to reality, and we have to do the things that need to be done to make it make the traffic run efficiently, and make sure that, you know, we avoid creating any hazards where, you know, where people end up having accidents or whatever. We need to make sure our traffic flows, and we need to make sure that people are safe.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I would like to say this. I think it's an incredible opportunity coming up for people to really take a close look and decide what they want for their tax money, and if they want to spend a whole lot for not getting much, they can do it.
All right, Steve Radack, former county commissioner and currently the Republican nominee for Harris County Precinct 4. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks so much. And when we come back, Big Bend and the border wall. Welcome back. Customs and Border Protection is pausing construction in Big Bend National Park. CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott said that on social media Monday. Now, Scott's announcement came amid several lawsuits filed to stop border wall-related construction in the Texas National Park. CBP was building part of a limited barrier in the park instead of a 30-foot wall as initially intended. They were in the middle of demolition, tearing down trees and carving the beginnings of roads. The effort has drawn concern from those on the right and left. ABC spoke with Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez.
You have Republican sheriffs in the community that are saying we don't have an immigration problem. And so it seems to me that the Trump administration just thinks, well, this is our national park and we can do whatever we want. But it defies logic in a couple of different ways. Number one, the Department of Homeland Security doesn't actually, in our opinion, have control or have the authority to do this because parks were given to the Department of the Interior. So I think that we have to start there. And that's why this case is different from every other border wall case, because it is in a national park. I think Trump thinks that he can, like he's painted the columns in the White House gold. I think he can come into federal properties and do whatever he wants with them. And we're here to say, no, there's a process. There are laws in place. You just can't wave your magic wand and do whatever you want to do with our sacred areas.
For more on the battle over Big Bend, JC and Angel join me once again. Angel, we'll start with you on this one. The optics of this make you question whether common sense, as you've told me, is common.
Well, Tom, it sure isn't, obviously. I'm grateful to be a part of a party that isn't focused on wasting $7 billion into a border wall on 175 acres of land that only sees less than 1% of illegal crossings over our environment. And so there's just a lot and a much to do about nothing, if I say, to be completely honest. And I think there are other ways to secure our border than what we're seeing in Big Bend.
Now, that's not to say, JC, that there aren't illegal crossings in this area. But is there another way to do this other than potentially building a big wall and tearing down all these native species of trees?
Sure, no, and we've seen the different tactics deployed, both by the state of Texas and also by the federal government with all the technology we have to patrol our border. But as we're stating here, it's a very long border, and part of that strategy is border wall. And my hopes is that when Border Patrol is looking at how we are going to protect this entire border wall, that we are looking at places that make the most sense for the border wall. We're not going where where natural barriers already exist, and we are putting it so that there's choke points so that we can have our advanced technology in those areas. There's a common sense way of doing this, and I think it is very necessary for protecting Texans in the United States.
So you think the Trump administration kind of saw, hey, maybe we overstepped a little bit, because they've said we're gonna back off. It's also in court.
Yes. Well, I think, there is, and this is why, this is what's great about our country, is that you can stand up and say, hey, I don't agree with that. You have both Republicans and Democrats saying, let's look and make sure that, Border Patrol, when you're looking at the strategy here, does this make the most sense? And, if it does, then I think that, it's going to, it'll prevail and move on. But when you have 13,000, back in 2023 crossing through the Big Bend area, those are just those that are apprehended, not all the ones that made it through without apprehension. That is a lot of people illegally entering the country every year, and we need to make sure that we're preventing that in the future.
I want to ask you this question, because you have a large footprint on social media. Is this a case where social media made a difference? Because that's where I saw a lot of the people in Big Bend like getting their voice heard, and it went viral in a lot of different cases.
Absolutely. People are seeing it happen in their own backyard. People love Big Bend. It doesn't matter where you lay on the political spectrum, right? And I think that to an extent, maybe our government thought no one was paying attention, and they were. And so I think it's been really awesome to see people that may not typically talk about politics or just policy talk about it online. My father used to say, or still says to me, prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And I think had we kept some of our environmental agencies and funding, maybe we could have seen this ahead of time. And it's not just the trees, but migration for animals and protecting our only national park in our state.
Texans are very independent. I mean, when you come for their parks,
man,
especially Big Bend, they're going to say something about it. Even if they support this current administration, they did not support what happened there.
Sure, and look, I'm going to go camping there later on this year. I don't want to see border wall in certain areas. I think it is very possible that our law enforcement agencies that were determining where those border walls weren't looking at the, likely what the possible impacts were on tourism. I think they're much more looking at what are the impacts of illegal immigration into the country. And look, if border wall is not going to work there, we can deploy other technology there. And I am glad that people stood up. I'm glad that their voices were heard, and I'm glad that we're relooking at this and hopefully finding other ways to make this happen.
If I can, I think it's also important to add that I'm also really curious to see how this is going to impact land ownership as well, because now there's conversations of, okay, if we're not actually uprooting bush and grass, right, does this mean taking part of land that may be owned by private owners and ranchers, eminent domain? And I know that folks are still really worried and fearful what's going to happen in the future and what other technologies will be used for surveillance.
Sure, and we know, and this is why the state of Texas had to step up and build so much of the border wall, is because it was easier for the state of Texas to make agreements with homeowners or landowners versus the federal government coming in and doing eminent domain. It takes years to accomplish, and the administration doesn't have years to accomplish that. And so they are having to make tough decisions on where to put it, where they have the ability to do it. The national parks end up having the easiest ability to make these things happen.
And I don't think this story is over. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. JC, Angel, good as always to have both of you on the program. That's it for This Week in Texas. We certainly appreciate you being with us. For all of our previous episodes, you can watch them on demand on Disney+, ABC13.com, or wherever you stream ABC 13. Until we see you again, have a great week. Be kind to one another.